The Heiress's Gambit. Complete story. Part 1, The Betrayal at the Masquerade. The Grand Masquerade Ball. The crystal chandeliers of Ashworth Manor sparkled like captured stars, casting dancing shadows across the ballroom where London's elite gathered for the season's most anticipated event. Isabella Hartley stood at the top of the marble staircase, her emerald silk gown flowing behind her like water, her face hidden behind an elegant golden mask decorated with peacock feathers. At 24, she was considered one of the most beautiful and wealthy heiresses in England, the only daughter of the late shipping magnate Thomas Hartley, who had left her a fortune that made even dukes jealous. Tonight was special. Tonight, her secret engagement to Lord Adrian Blackwood would finally be announced. They had kept their courtship private for 6 months, away from the prying eyes of society gossips. Adrian had insisted on discretion, saying he wanted their love to grow naturally without pressure from their families or speculation from the ton. Isabella had thought it romantic. She had thought many foolish things about Adrian Blackwood. A heart full of dreams. Isabella descended the stairs gracefully, her heart beating with excitement. She scanned the crowd of masked faces, looking for Adrian's tall figure. He had promised to meet her in the ballroom at precisely 9 o'clock, where he would formally ask her father's old friend, Lord Pemberton, for permission to announce their engagement. It was a formality, really. Everyone who mattered already knew that Isabella Hartley was destined to become Lady Blackwood. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing servant and moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries with acquaintances. The orchestra played a beautiful waltz, and couples swirled across the dance floor in a kaleidoscope of colors. Isabella felt like she was floating in a dream. By midnight, she would be publicly engaged to the man she loved. By spring, she would be married. Her life was perfect. The Garden Discovery. As 9 o'clock approached, Isabella made her way toward the conservatory, where she and Adrian had agreed to meet before the announcement. The glass-enclosed room was filled with exotic flowers and plants, dimly lit by lanterns hanging from the ceiling. The scent of jasmine and roses filled the air. She stepped inside, expecting to find Adrian waiting for her. Instead, she heard voices. Low, intimate voices coming from behind a large arrangement of palm fronds. "We must tell her soon," a woman's voice said. A voice Isabella recognized instantly. It was her cousin Celeste, the orphan daughter of her mother's sister, whom Isabella had welcomed into her home after Celeste's parents died 2 years ago. Celeste, whom Isabella had treated like a sister. "Not yet," a man replied. Isabella's blood turned to ice. It was Adrian. "Once we're married, the fortune will be legally mine. Then we can be together openly." The truth unveiled. Isabella stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. She wanted to run, to scream, to pretend she hadn't heard what she'd just heard. But her feet remained rooted to the spot as the conversation continued. "But I hate watching you pretend to love her," Celeste whined. "The way you look at her, the way you hold her hand. It makes me sick." "It's an act, darling." "Nothing more," Adrian said, his voice cold and calculating. "Isabella is plain and boring, but she's rich. Once I have access to her fortune, I'll ensure she has an accident. A tragic fall down the stairs, perhaps. A riding accident. Then you and I can marry, and we'll have everything we ever wanted." Isabella's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. An accident. They were planning to kill her. "What if someone suspects?" Celeste asked. "Who would suspect? Everyone knows how devoted I am to my dear Isabella. I'll be the grieving widower, consoled by her beloved cousin. After a respectable mourning period, we'll marry. It's perfect. The witness in the shadows." Isabella stumbled backward, her vision blurring with tears. She had to get out of there, had to think, had to plan. But in her haste, she collided with someone standing in the shadows near the conservatory entrance. Strong hands steadied her, preventing her from falling. "Careful," a deep voice said. Isabella looked up into the face of a stranger. He wore a simple black mask, but she could see his eyes, dark, intelligent, and full of concern. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit that spoke of wealth and power. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Isabella realized tears were streaming down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. She tried to compose herself, but the shock was too great. I need to leave," she whispered. The stranger glanced toward the conservatory, where Adrian and Celeste's voices could still be heard. His jaw tightened. "You heard them," he said. It wasn't a question. Isabella nodded, unable to speak. "Come with me," the stranger said, offering his arm. "You shouldn't be alone right now. A refuge in the library." He led her through the crowded ballroom, navigating expertly through the dancers and socialites, until they reached a quiet library on the second floor. He closed the door behind them and guided her to a chair by the fireplace. "Brandy," he said, pouring a generous amount into a crystal glass. "Drink this." "You're in shock." Isabella accepted the glass with trembling hands and took a sip. The liquid burned her throat, but it helped clear her head. She looked at her rescuer properly for the first time. Even with the mask, she could tell he was handsome, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and those penetrating dark eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Who are you?" she asked. "Marcus Rothwell," he replied, settling into the chair across from her. "And you're Isabella Hartley, the famous shipping heiress. We've never been formally introduced, but I know who you are." "Everyone does." "The mysterious Marcus Rothwell." Isabella had heard the name Marcus Rothwell before. He was a self-made businessman who had built an empire in trade and investments. Some called him a genius, others called him ruthless. He moved in the highest circles of society, but he wasn't nobility. He had earned his wealth through intelligence and determination rather than inheriting it. The old aristocracy looked down on him, but they couldn't ignore his power and influence. "You heard everything," Isabella said quietly. "What I heard doesn't leave this room," Marcus said firmly. "You have my word." "Your word?" Isabella laughed bitterly. "I thought I knew what someone's word meant. I thought Adrian loved me. I thought Celeste was my friend. How can I trust anyone's word ever again?" Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Because unlike Lord Blackwood, I have nothing to gain from deceiving you. I'm already wealthy. I don't need your fortune. But I do understand betrayal, Miss Hartley. I understand it better than you know. Seeds of revenge." Something in his tone made Isabella pause. There was a darkness in his eyes, a shadow of old pain. "What do you mean?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "5 years ago, I was engaged to a woman I loved deeply. Or thought I loved. She married my business partner instead, a man with a title and family connections I could never have. They destroyed my reputation and stole several of my business ventures. It nearly ruined me. What did you do?" "I rebuilt. I became more successful than they could ever imagine. And I made sure they understood what they had lost." Marcus's smile was cold. "Revenge, Miss Hartley, is a dish best served cold. But it must be served strategically." Isabella felt something shift inside her. The shock and heartbreak were transforming into something else, anger. Cold, focused anger. "I want revenge," she said quietly. "I want them to suffer for what they plan to do to me." "Good," Marcus said. "Because I have a proposition for you." "The proposal." Isabella set down her brandy glass and met his gaze. "What kind of proposition?" "Marry me," Marcus said simply. Isabella stared at him. "What? Have you lost your mind? We just met. I don't even know you." "Exactly. Which makes this a purely business arrangement." Marcus stood and walked to the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. "Think about it logically. If you expose Adrian now, it becomes your word against his. He'll deny everything. Celeste will support him. Society loves a scandal, but they also love Lord Blackwood. His family has connections and influence. You might ruin him, but you'll also ruin yourself in the process. Then what do you suggest? We get married. Quickly and publicly. You show Adrian and Celeste that you don't need them, that you've found someone better. Someone wealthier, more powerful, more influential than Adrian could ever hope to be. Understanding the terms. Isabella's mind raced. But why would you do this? What do you gain? Marcus turned to face her. Legitimacy. Acceptance. I'm wealthy, Miss Hartley, but I'm not nobility. I'm not accepted in certain circles no matter how much money I have. Marriage to you, a woman from one of England's most respected families, would open doors that have been closed to me. It would give me the social standing I need to complete certain business deals and investments. So you'd be using me, Isabella said flatly. We'd be using each other, Marcus corrected. You get revenge and protection from Adrian's schemes. I get social acceptance and business advantages. It's a fair trade. Isabella stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where couples strolled under the moonlight. Everything she had believed about her life had shattered in the space of one conversation. Adrian didn't love her. Celeste had betrayed her. Her perfect future was a lie built on greed and murder. But Marcus Rothwell was offering her a different future. A future where she had power instead of being a victim. The decision. What would be the terms, she asked, still looking out the window. We marry as soon as possible. We maintain a public appearance of a happy marriage, attend social events together, present a united front. In private, we live separate lives. I won't interfere with your affairs, and you won't interfere with mine. After 1 year, if either of us wishes to end the arrangement, we can quietly divorce. I'll ensure you're financially secure regardless of what happens. And revenge? Isabella asked, turning to face him. Marcus smiled, and for the first time, she saw warmth in his expression. Oh, we'll make them regret ever crossing you, Miss Hartley. I promise you that. Adrian wants your fortune? We'll make sure he never gets a penny. Celeste wants your place in society? We'll ensure every door closes in her face. But we'll do it carefully, strategically, so they can't trace it back to us. Isabella walked back to him and extended her hand. I accept your proposal, Mr. Rothwell. When do we begin? Marcus took her hand, his grip firm and warm. We begin tonight. Let's go back to that ballroom and announce our engagement. Let's give Lord Blackwood and your dear cousin the shock of their lives. The announcement. Isabella felt a surge of dark satisfaction. Yes. Let's. They returned to the ballroom together, Isabella's hand resting on Marcus's arm. She had removed her tear-stained mask and replaced it with a fresh one from her reticule. Her face was composed, her expression serene. No one would know that her world had just collapsed and been rebuilt in the space of an hour. Marcus guided her to the center of the ballroom, where Lord Pemberton stood talking with a group of influential gentlemen. Isabella spotted Adrian across the room, standing with Celeste. They were laughing together, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Lord Pemberton, Marcus said smoothly. Might I have a word? The older man turned, surprised. Mr. Rothwell. Of course. What can I do for you? I wish to announce my engagement, Marcus said clearly, his voice carrying across the ballroom. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. To Miss Isabella Hartley. The shock waves. The ballroom fell silent. Isabella could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could hear the collective intake of breath from the assembled guests. She saw Adrian's face turn white with shock. Saw Celeste's mouth drop open in disbelief. Miss Hartley? Lord Pemberton looked at Isabella. Is this true? Isabella smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. Yes, Lord Pemberton. Mr. Rothwell and I have been conducting a private courtship. We wished to keep it secret until we were certain of our feelings. Now we are certain. But. Adrian pushed through the crowd, his face flushed. Isabella, what is this madness? We're engaged. We'd been planning to announce our engagement tonight. Isabella looked at him with cold eyes. I have no idea what you're talking about, Lord Blackwood. We've shared a few dances at social events, nothing more. If you believed there was more to our acquaintance, I'm afraid you were mistaken. You're lying. Adrian's composure cracked. Tell them, Isabella. Tell them we're in love. The perfect performance. Marcus stepped forward, his expression dangerous. Lord Blackwood, I believe Miss Hartley has made her position clear. She and I are engaged. Any previous misunderstandings on your part are unfortunate, but they don't change reality. I suggest you accept the situation gracefully. The threat in Marcus's voice was subtle but unmistakable. Adrian was a lord, but Marcus Rothwell had power, real, tangible power that came from wealth and influence. Adrian could challenge him, but he would lose. Celeste appeared at Adrian's side, her face a mask of shock and fury. Isabella, how could you, she whispered. After everything we've shared, everything we've been through together. Isabella met her cousin's eyes. How could I, she repeated softly. That's an interesting question, Celeste. I suppose I simply realized that family isn't always what it appears to be. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we should trust the least. She saw understanding dawn in Celeste's eyes, understanding and fear. Celeste knew that Isabella had heard them in the conservatory. The color drained from her face. Congratulations to the happy couple, Lord Pemberton announced, breaking the tension. This calls for champagne. A toast to Mr. Rothwell and Miss Hartley. The beginning of war. As the ballroom erupted in conversation and servants rushed to bring champagne, Isabella felt Marcus's hand tighten slightly on her arm. A gesture of support, of solidarity. They were allies now, partners in a game of revenge and social maneuvering. She looked across the room at Adrian and Celeste. They stood together, isolated in the crowd, their faces twisted with shock and anger. Their perfect plan had crumbled. The fortune they had schemed to steal was now beyond their reach. But Isabella knew this was just the beginning. Adrian and Celeste wouldn't give up easily. They would fight back, try to expose her sudden engagement as a sham, try to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Let them try, Isabella thought coldly. She had Marcus Rothwell on her side now, a man who understood revenge, who knew how to play the long game. Together, they would destroy Adrian and Celeste so completely that they would wish they had never heard the name Isabella Hartley. As Marcus raised his champagne glass in a toast, his dark eyes met hers. There was something in his gaze, respect, perhaps, or recognition. They were both wounded, both betrayed, both seeking revenge. But neither of them realized that revenge would be the least complicated part of their arrangement. Neither of them suspected that fake engagement would lead to real feelings, that strategic partnership would transform into something far more dangerous. Neither of them knew that they were about to fall in love. The game had begun. Part 2, The Game of Hearts begins. Moving into Rothwell Manor. 3 days after the masquerade ball, Isabella Hartley found herself standing in the grand entrance hall of Rothwell Manor, surrounded by her trunks and traveling cases. The marriage had happened with shocking speed, a special license procured through Marcus's connections, a quiet ceremony at a small chapel with only a handful of witnesses. Lord Pemberton had attended, along with Marcus's business associates. From Isabella's side, there was no one. She had sent word to Celeste that her presence wasn't required. The house was magnificent. Far more impressive than the Hartley family estate, Rothwell Manor was a testament to Marcus's success. Modern, elegant, and filled with art and treasures from around the world. It spoke of a man who had built something from nothing, who had created his own legacy without the benefit of inherited wealth or noble blood. Your rooms are in the East Wing, Marcus said, appearing beside her. He had changed from his wedding attire into more casual clothes, dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. It was the first time Isabella had seen him looking anything less than formally dressed. "I've arranged for a suite of rooms, bedroom, sitting room, private study. You'll have complete privacy. Establishing boundaries." Isabella followed him up the sweeping staircase, her hand trailing along the polished banister. "And where are your rooms?" "West wing," Marcus replied. "Opposite side of the house. We'll share common areas, the dining room, the library, the drawing rooms. But otherwise, we maintain our separate spaces." As we agreed. He opened a door to reveal a beautiful suite decorated in shades of cream and gold. Sunlight streamed through tall windows overlooking a manicured garden. A large four-poster bed dominated the bedroom, and through another door, Isabella could see a cozy sitting room with a fireplace and comfortable chairs. "It's lovely," she said honestly. "I'm glad you approve." Marcus paused at the doorway. "I've arranged for a lady's maid, her name is Sarah. She's experienced and discreet. If you need anything else, just let me know." "Thank you." Isabella turned to face him. "When do we begin, the other part of our arrangement?" Marcus's expression hardened. "The revenge part?" "Soon. I've already started making inquiries into Adrian's finances. I want to know exactly how deep his debts run before we make our first move. The investigation begins." Over the next week, Isabella settled into her new life as Mrs. Rothwell. It was strange, living in the same house as a man she barely knew, presenting themselves as a married couple to the world while maintaining complete separation in private. They took breakfast together each morning, discussing the day's plans with the formal politeness of business partners. They attended social events together in the evenings, playing their roles perfectly, the devoted husband, the happy bride. But in between, they barely saw each other. Marcus spent his days in his study or at his offices in the city, managing his various business interests. Isabella occupied herself with reading, walking in the gardens, and getting to know the household staff. It should have been perfect. A marriage of convenience with clear boundaries and mutual benefits. But Isabella found herself thinking about Marcus more than she should. Wondering about his past, his thoughts, the darkness she sometimes glimpsed in his eyes. She was curious about the man behind the businessman, the person beneath the carefully constructed facade. A dinner revelation. One evening, about 10 days after their marriage, Marcus invited her to dine with him privately in the smaller, more intimate dining room rather than the grand formal one they usually used for appearances. "I have news about Adrian," he said as they settled into their seats. "My investigators have been thorough." Isabella leaned forward, her dinner forgotten. "What did you learn?" "Lord Blackwood is in serious financial trouble. His father left him with massive debts when he died 2 years ago. Adrian has been living far beyond his means, borrowing money from various creditors to maintain his lifestyle. He owes over £50,000, a staggering sum." Isabella's eyes widened. 50,000? I had no idea. He hid it well. But here's the interesting part, 3 months ago, he borrowed £20,000 from a particularly unscrupulous moneylender named Silas Graven. A man known for, shall we say, violent collection methods. The loan comes due in 2 months. If Adrian can't pay, Graven will take everything, his house, his lands, his title won't protect him from a debt that size. Understanding the game. So Adrian needed my fortune desperately, Isabella said slowly. It wasn't just greed. It was survival. Exactly. He was counting on marrying you, gaining access to your trust fund, and using it to pay off his debts. Your accident would have come after he'd secured the money and paid off Graven. Then he'd inherit the rest of your fortune as your widower. Isabella felt cold. It was one thing to know they had planned to kill her. It was another to understand just how calculated and necessary her death had been to their plans. And Celeste? She's penniless. Completely dependent on your charity. When her parents died, they left nothing but debts. You took her in, supported her, gave her a place in society. Without you, she's nothing. Marcus's voice was hard. She saw Adrian as her only chance at security and status. Together, they formed a desperate alliance. What do we do now? Isabella asked. Marcus smiled, the expression cold and calculating. Now we destroy them. Carefully and completely. The first move. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus would approach Silas Graven and purchase Adrian's debt. Then, at precisely the right moment, they would call in the loan. Adrian would be ruined, his property seized, his reputation destroyed, his title worthless without the wealth to support it. But Isabella wanted more than Adrian's financial ruin. She wanted him to feel the same betrayal, the same shock and heartbreak she had experienced. We need to turn them against each other, she said one evening as she and Marcus sat in the library, planning their strategy. Adrian and Celeste. If they believe the other has betrayed them, it will hurt more than any financial loss. Marcus looked at her with new respect. You have a devious mind, Mrs. Rothwell. I'm impressed. What do you suggest? The elaborate plan. Isabella outlined her idea. They would plant evidence suggesting that Celeste had been secretly meeting with other wealthy men, looking for alternative prospects in case Adrian failed. Similarly, they would create situations where Adrian appeared to be courting other heiresses, preparing to abandon Celeste. We'll use their paranoia and desperation against them, Isabella explained. They're already under pressure. Already afraid their plan has failed. A few carefully placed doubts, some anonymous letters, some staged encounters, and they'll turn on each other like wolves. It's brilliant, Marcus said. Cruel, but brilliant. Isabella met his gaze. They were going to kill me, Marcus. Cruel seems appropriate. Something shifted in his expression. It was the first time she had used his given name so casually. You're not at all what I expected, he said quietly. When I proposed this arrangement, I thought you'd be a passive partner. But you're formidable. Unexpected attraction. Isabella felt heat rise to her cheeks. Is that a compliment or criticism? It's an observation. And a compliment. Marcus stood and moved to the window, his back to her. I should warn you, Isabella. This game we're playing, it's dangerous. Not just for Adrian and Celeste. For us too. Revenge can consume you. Change you. Make you into something you don't recognize. Is that what happened to you? Isabella asked softly. When you were betrayed? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Yes, he finally said. I let my anger and hurt drive me for years. I built my empire partly out of ambition, but partly out of spite. To prove to the woman who rejected me that she'd made a mistake. To show my former partner that he couldn't destroy me. Did it work? Did you feel better after you'd succeeded? No. Marcus turned to face her, and Isabella saw something vulnerable in his expression. Success didn't heal the wound. It just gave me something else to focus on besides the pain. That's why I'm warning you, Isabella. Revenge might satisfy you in the moment, but it won't make you whole again. A moment of connection. Isabella stood and walked over to him. Then why are you helping me? Because I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. At least if we do this together, I can ensure it doesn't consume you completely. I can help you stay yourself while we make them pay. They stood close, closer than they'd been since their wedding. Isabella could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Thank you, she whispered. For understanding. For helping me. Isabella. Marcus reached out and touched her cheek gently. We should be careful. Careful of what? Of this. Of forgetting that this is an arrangement. Of letting it become something more. But even as he said it, he didn't move away. And Isabella found that she didn't want him to. The air between them felt charged, electric. She could see the war in his eyes, duty versus desire, logic versus emotion. The almost kiss. "Marcus," she breathed, and then he was kissing her. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was passionate and desperate, as if he'd been holding back for weeks and could no longer maintain control. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, and Isabella wrapped her arms around his neck, losing herself in the sensation. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't strategic or calculated. This was real and terrifying and wonderful all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus stepped back. "I apologize," he said formally. "That was inappropriate." "Was it?" Isabella challenged. "We're married, Marcus. Kissing isn't exactly scandalous. We're not really married. Not in any way that matters. This is business." "Is that what that was? Business?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "I don't know what that was. But it can't happen again. We agreed to separate lives. I won't complicate things by blurring those lines." The hurt and confusion. Isabella felt a sharp sting of rejection. "Of course. How foolish of me to forget the terms of our arrangement. I'll be more careful in the future." She turned to leave, but Marcus caught her arm. "Isabella, wait. I'm not rejecting you. I'm trying to protect both of us. If we start down this path, if we let feelings get involved, it could destroy everything. Or it could make everything better," Isabella said quietly. "Did you consider that possibility?" She pulled free and left the library, her heart pounding. As she climbed the stairs to her suite, she tried to understand her own feelings. A month ago, she'd been in love with Adrian Blackwood. Now she was married to Marcus Rothwell, a man she barely knew, and she couldn't stop thinking about him. Was it real? Or was she just transferring her need for affection onto the first man who showed her kindness after Adrian's betrayal? She didn't know. And that uncertainty terrified her. The social season continues. The next few weeks were awkward. Isabella and Marcus maintained their public facade perfectly, but in private, they were careful to keep distance between them. They never mentioned the kiss. They focused instead on their revenge plot, which was progressing beautifully. Marcus had purchased Adrian's debt from Silas Graven. The anonymous letters had been sent, planting seeds of doubt between Adrian and Celeste. Isabella had even arranged for a staged encounter where Celeste appeared to be meeting secretly with another wealthy gentleman, actually one of Marcus's business associates playing a role. The ton was buzzing with speculation. Some praised Isabella for making such an advantageous match. Others whispered that her sudden marriage to Marcus was suspicious, that perhaps there had been a scandal. But no one could prove anything, and Marcus's wealth and influence protected them from serious gossip. The dinner party trap. Then came the dinner party. Lady Ashworth, the same woman who had hosted the masquerade ball where everything began, invited both couples, Isabella and Marcus, Adrian and Celeste, who were now claiming to be engaged, though no one believed they were truly in love. "It's perfect," Marcus said when they received the invitation. "A chance for all four of us to be in the same room. We can make our next move." Isabella felt nervous. She hadn't spoken to Adrian or Celeste since the masquerade. The thought of sitting across a dinner table from them, pretending to be civilized, made her stomach churn. "I'll be right beside you," Marcus promised, as if sensing her anxiety. "They can't hurt you anymore, Isabella. You're under my protection now." The confrontation. The dinner party was as uncomfortable as Isabella had feared. Lady Ashworth had seated them strategically, Isabella and Marcus on one side of the long table, Adrian and Celeste directly across from them. The conversation was painfully polite, everyone dancing around the elephant in the room. Adrian looked terrible. He had lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Celeste appeared brittle, her smile too bright, her laugh too loud. They were cracking under the pressure, Isabella realized. The debt, the failed scheme, the suspicion between them, it was taking its toll. Mrs. Rothwell, Adrian said during a lull in conversation, his voice dripping with false courtesy. You look well. Marriage clearly agrees with you. It does, Isabella replied coolly. I'm very happy. Thank you for your concern. I must admit, your sudden marriage came as quite a surprise to everyone who knew you. So impulsive. So unlike the cautious Isabella Hartley we all thought we knew. Marcus's hand found Isabella's under the table, squeezing gently. Sometimes, Isabella said clearly, we don't truly know ourselves until we're forced to see things clearly. My marriage to Marcus was the best decision I ever made. It saved me from making a terrible mistake. The truth begins to surface. The barb hit home. Adrian's face flushed with anger. And what mistake would that be? Trusting the wrong people, Isabella said. Believing pretty words and false promises. Thinking that someone loved me when they only loved my fortune. The table fell silent. Other guests looked between them with fascinated horror. A public confrontation at a dinner party was scandalous. Celeste tried to defuse the situation. Isabella, dear, you're being dramatic. If you're referring to some misunderstanding between you and Adrian. There was no misunderstanding, Celeste, Isabella interrupted. I understand everything perfectly now. How you both played me for a fool. How you plan to. Marcus squeezed her hand again, a warning. They had agreed not to reveal what they knew, not yet. The revenge needed to be complete before they showed their hand. Isabella took a breath and smiled. How you hoped I would make a different choice. But I didn't. I chose Marcus. And I'll never regret it. A united front. Marcus raised his wine glass. To my wife, he said clearly. The most intelligent, courageous woman I've ever known. I'm the one who's fortunate, not her. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Isabella looked at him and saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip, something that looked very much like real affection. Was he acting? Or had their arrangement evolved into something neither of them had anticipated? As the dinner party continued, Isabella found herself watching Marcus. The way he defended her, protected her, stood by her side against Adrian and Celeste. This was more than a business partnership. More than strategic alliance. This was beginning to feel like something real. And that realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Because in 3 months, no, now just 2 months, their arrangement would end. They would go their separate ways, just as they had agreed. Unless something changed. Unless they both admitted that the lines between fake and real had blurred beyond recognition. But Isabella was afraid to hope. Afraid to believe that Marcus might feel the same growing attachment that she did. Afraid that she was simply fooling herself again, seeing love where there was only convenience. The game of revenge was progressing perfectly. But the game of hearts was far more complicated than either of them had anticipated. And Isabella had no idea how it would end. Part 3, When Revenge Turns to Love. The breaking point. 2 months after their marriage, Isabella sat in the morning room reading the newspaper when Marcus entered, his face grave. It's done, he said quietly. I've called in Adrian's loan. The documents were served this morning. Isabella's hand trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. This was what they had been working toward, Adrian's complete financial ruin. So why did she suddenly feel hollow instead of triumphant? And Celeste, she asked. Our last anonymous letter was delivered yesterday. The one suggesting that Adrian has been secretly negotiating to marry the widow Lady Thornton, who has a fortune even larger than yours. Celeste will have received it by now. Isabella should have felt satisfied. The revenge plot was reaching its climax. Adrian would lose everything, his property, his status, his future. Celeste would believe herself betrayed by the man she'd sacrificed everything for. They would both suffer exactly as they deserved. But all Isabella felt was tired. An unexpected visit. The sound of raised voices in the entrance hall made both Isabella and Marcus stand. Before either could move, the door burst open and Celeste rushed in, her face streaked with tears, her clothes disheveled. "How could you?" she screamed at Isabella. "How could you do this to us?" Marcus moved to place himself between Isabella and Celeste, but Isabella touched his arm, stopping him. "Let her speak," she said quietly. "Adrian is ruined. Completely destroyed. That moneylender is taking everything, his house, his lands, everything. And it's your fault. You bought the debt, didn't you? You and your wealthy husband orchestrated all of this." "Yes," Isabella said calmly. "We did."